from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail. He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray. Pilgrim of gray, oh steward of lands, you carry the light in your weather-worn hands. A tale at the hearth, a guide through the night. You open the gate between the wrong and the right.
Welcome, weary travelers, to the Pilgrim's Gray Inn, where the road bends, the fire is warm, and stories of ancient battles still echo through the rafters. Tonight, we've got a special guest joining us by the hearth, a storyteller, artist, and man who's taken the timeless account of David and Goliath and forged it anew in ink and stone. He's the author of the graphic novel Five Stones, a gritty retelling that dives beneath the Sunday school surface into the raw spiritual conflict between faith and fear, giants and kings. His name's Adam Ferris, and if you haven't heard that name yet, I think you will. So Adam, welcome to the Pilgrim's Gray Inn, brother. Pull up a chair, grab a mug, and tell us a bit about who you are, how the story found you, and what inspired you to bring Five Stones to life.
Yes, man, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for bringing me on. This is awesome. We're going to have a great show. Everybody get ready. We're going to get in some wild stuff.
Absolutely.
Adam Ferris, writer, biblical researcher. And my story's really crazy. 3 years ago, I was just a normal guy. I had a faith background, but I was a normal guy, distribution center manager, just living my life. Career was my focus. And where I was at was way more stressful than it needed to be. It took a lot of toll on me. At that point, I'd been up into it 13 years. So I was getting wore out, and everything was coming to a head kind of. And then my father passed, obviously super hard on the family. And I just started thinking about David and Goliath, of just like dissecting it. And I didn't know why I was thinking about it. I just kept thinking about it. Like, what did Goliath really look like? You know, I'm a super skeptic in general, you know what I mean? So it was like, what does the story really look like? And I didn't know why I kept thinking about it. But as with death, everything came to a really hard place, and I found myself not sure what to do and what direction to go in. And having a faith background, being in the church as a kid, like I could feel what you would say is the knocking, right? You know, they always say God's knocking at your heart. Like I could feel that. I could, you know, with my background, pattern recognition, I kind of knew what was up. And then I started thinking, well, maybe that's why I'm thinking about David and Goliath. So I did what, you know, you hear people talk about. Like I just tapped out. It's like, man, I feel you knocking. I really, really need help. I don't know what to do next. So if you can help my family and help me help my family, I'll do whatever it is you're asking me to do. You know, I'm just like full on. I don't know what this is, but I'm down. That's what got me here. So basically it started with David and Goliath. I knew that's where I needed to start. So I just dissected that, and it ultimately took the form of a graphic novel. The ultimate direction I knew I wanted to go with, and where I was being pulled, was not necessarily animation, but putting the real Bible stories into a format, a visual format, not a reading format. Because I'm not a big reader, so like, how do you reach... You know, if you're doing marketing, how do you reach your demographic? And it's like, to me, I love comic books. I like MCU. That would get me, right? So it was like, then let's do that. And I know me. I know what I'm into. You know, I like edgy stuff. So it was like, all right, this will be fun. I feel like, exactly. I feel like you want me to do this. And I feel like that story probably is more than what we know. I was like, so, you know, let's have some fun. And I produced the comic book, got it out. I worked with an artist, and I did the painting. I did the color. But in the background, I was just researching and just reading the Bible, and, you know, just trying to do my walk with God, because that was a big part of this as well. But as I'm reading the Bible, it was like, man, there's some medieval stuff in this thing. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking about Tolkien. You mentioned that. I was just like, all right, this, because you hear that a lot in the fringe, is like, you know, blah. But for me, I hadn't really seen that yet. So I kept noticing some wild stuff, and I started my blog because I knew I was supposed to find this stuff, right? Because like, why else would I be finding this? It just, you know, like we talked about our work background. I knew that that was a sign. Like if I didn't find something, it's because nothing was there, but I was, so there is. So I started the blog, and because I didn't want to take away from the book, but eventually I realized, a year into it, I realized, you know, not only is this story like way different than we understand, it's way more medieval, and that is my direction. That's my point, is to find it and talk about it, share it, for whatever it's worth. And so, again, that's how I ended up here on your show this morning. Basically, I just dove in, and I allowed, I hate to say that word, but I let God just lead me and show me whatever it is. I go in this direction, I'll go whatever it is. And it's been a wild journey. I found a lot of stuff. I've had some really fun conversations. Today's going to be nuts. So yeah, that's Adam Ferris in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. I know something you just said kind of struck me. I always think when people talk about salvation, I always like to use the term receiving Christ, not, like, you know what I mean? Like he's the one that looks for you first, and you're simply, receiving or rejecting. I don't know what the normal expression for it is, but it's usually, like you just said, allowing or permission, and I know that's a part of it, but to me, I think receiving is a better word to describe what's going on. So you mentioned Tolkien, so I kind of want to go here. One of my favorite passages out of the Return of the King is not necessarily one of my favorite books, but it does contain one of my favorite stories, and probably the same for a lot of people, and that is the Battle for the Pelennor Fields. One of my favorite lines from Gandalf is when Merry asks him, when is the dawn coming? And Gandalf says, the darkness has begun, there will be no dawn. And then there's this huge pitched battle, right? But before that battle begins, there's these armies coming to fill the city so that they can defend the city better. And one of the princes that comes is Prince Imrahil and his Swan Knights. And we talked about this before the show, but one of his knights was like having 100 normal men. And so with that, I know we talk about, or in your novel, obviously the finds 5 stones is because there wasn't just Goliath there. He had his 3 sons and a brother. I don't know if they were necessarily specifically on the battlefield, but I'm sure David had to know, if I kill Goliath, it's not like his sons are just going to sit there idle. They're going to do something about it, So he had 5 stones. And then later, of course, David goes on to be a brilliant military strategist. Obviously, he's an incredible fighter. He took out a lion and a bear with his bare hands. I mean, how many of us could do that? And it makes me wonder, to some degree, if David had some sort of God-given strength that we don't know about. In another podcast, I heard somebody mentioning his feet in some odd way, and I didn't know what to think about that. But regardless, he still had his princes, I think of the movie 47 Ronin, these guys that were just like, one of them, like Imrahil's princes, his Swan Knights, were like having 1,000 guys. Like, I broke them into groups when I was looking into the notes, and I had the first 3 listed as his elites, which were Josheb Beshebeth, I think or Adino the Esnite. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, since this isn't live, somebody's knocking on my door. Hold on one second.
Yeah, go for it. I'll edit it out.
I swear. Oh my gosh. It's the neighbor.
I know you have 4 children.
Dog, and he's just like knock, 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 knock. And it was like, dude. All right. Anyways, so that is a really, really fun one. So David's 37 Mighty Men. It's super complex, but an awesome, incredible story. In Samuel, there's the list of the 37. And then in Chronicles, there's the 37 plus 40. No, I'm sorry. Plus like 17 more. I forget the number right this second, which I'll get into it. But what you just said, the Jochebed, that is a super, super awesome one, because in Samuel, it mentions, and I wish I had that wrote down. Man, I'm so glad you said that. It mentions the Jochebed Teshemont Heron, if I say that right. And then it goes into Adino, Eleazar, and Shamama. But
Yes.
in so in Chronicles, I'll say it and get ahead of myself. So in Chronicles, it mentions the Jashabet as the first of the top three, but then it lists three more. So that's four. So I figured it took me a while. So what it is, it's real time, dude. Like we look at Bible stories as Bible stories, but these are real people, and these are stories written down by real people. So the chronicler, we're not really conclusive on who exactly is the chronicler who wrote the Chronicles, but that actual human in BC times or whenever this was translated or transcribed from, scribe to blah, he misspelled some stuff, miscommunicated. The actual person in BC. So Jashabet, what that statement actually says, and it's so incredible. That's why I'm getting so hype about this one statement. Because it says these are the names of David's mighty men, and then the Jashabet. But translated is these are the names of David's mighty men, comma, he who sits on the throne of knowledge, comma, the same as Adino the Etzni. Now, why that's so important is we're going to get into on how wild these guys are and how bad and giants and that line right there is saying in comparison to David. So all the wild stuff we're about to get into in BC times when this was coming out, David was so revered as a warlord and a guy of heart and a guy of God that all of these giants still weren't better than him. So that statement right there,
It's
that's
pretty
why I get so
amazing.
passionate. Yeah, right? Like that one line. So anyways, Dino the Etzni, Eleazar the son of Dodo, and Shamama the son of Ag. What I learned very early on is some of these guys, they're not in genealogy, so you got to break down their name. Some of them are in genealogy. It's crazy when you're really, really researching the Bible. But Adino the Etzni, Etz is a Hebrew word for tree. So Etzni, he is tree people, big as a tree, right? So
That would
then,
explain how he's able to kill 800 men with a spear.
and that's the other thing, because the whole argument are there giants or not? Like the Bible tells us at the very beginning, yes, there are, but being a parable, it's up to us to figure out who's the giant or not. And the way you do it is translate the name, look at the story, right? Because this dude who isn't a tree people, big as a tree, however that translates, fought 800 people himself. And he was the top of David's top three. So, right, like that's in working world, those are our pieces to figure out where that product went. Eleazar, the son of Dodo, grandson of Ahohi. Now, he is an Achochi, which is, they didn't have the proper word for this animal. It's a howling beast. That's the Achochi part.
So a dog dude.
Right?
Yeah.
Then the third of his top three is Shamama, the son of Ag, the Herite. Right? Translated as appalling desolation. I'm sorry, that's Shamama. Herite means mountain dweller or a mountaineer. And then we know in other parts of the Bible, all the giants were the mountain dwellers. So his top three of his 37, they're not even in the 37. That's just the top three. 2 giants and some form of a beast man. And all three attributed to single battles of like 800, 300. Mama held off a field of lentils himself by a Philistine
that
army.
is like the coolest story. I got goosebumps when I read it. Like one dude holding, it's just amazing to me. And if you look further, like you're saying, you find out that the location he's from are, were giant clans of Raphaim resided through the whole area. One of the things that interested me about the Dogman guy, or possible Dogman guy, regardless of what he fought a battle where like I don't know if it's because he killed so many people or he was so strong, but his hand, if I remember the Hebrew, it like cleaved to it, like he was like one with him, or He would not lose the grip. He was so strong. There's no way you're knocking the sword out of his hand. It was basically like vice gripped to the sword. It's
And
crazy.
those are those details to tell us, right? Because how do you write a book, a story, and tell everybody that's going to last through time? It has to be some kind of a parable. And those are those little details to tell us, like, this was a monster battle, monster dude, to the point that his hand froze to the sword because he was just relentless. And you think about humans, right? You know, in the army, they tell you, like, you can run further than you really think you can. Humans, the body's a machine. Like, yeah, the top 3 of those dudes were just are super phenomenal. And there's a couple other examples in the Bible where, like, one person conquers a town or does a phenomenal feat, and all of those guys, if you track their genealogy, it's the same thing. It is Nephilim DNA, plain and simple.
I agree totally. I'm absolutely on board with that. Those seem to be like, I don't know if they're commanders, but they seem to have in scripture the most attributed to them, those 3 out of some of the other ones. You can, if you dig, you can find out some of their background, but there's not a whole lot written about them. But those 3, and then I had a second tier list of David's nephew, and then I don't know how to pronounce it, but in my notes it says Benaiah, son of Jehoiada from Kabzeel, who happened to kill 2 of these lion men by himself, which could not have been an easy feat. I mean, and apparently some sort of very tall Egyptian. He appears to be some sort of Egyptian giant. So sometimes I sit here and I think to myself, where was my brain at when I was in church? I wasn't raised in church, but I began going later in life. And I remember telling myself, well, I want to read through scripture, Old Testament to New Testament. And then another time I read a chronological Bible. And sadly, much to my own shame, you gloss over this stuff. And unless you know what to look for, and you're specifically looking for it, you miss this. And to me, ever since going all the way back, because I'm writing a book too, I didn't tell you that, but years ago, after reading Tolkien, I wanted to write a book. And I wanted it to be about the antediluvian world and kind of a fantasy setting. So I'm mixing fact with fiction, because oftentimes a truth is more readily absorbed by the public if you tell it from a fiction story, even though you're using real history details and so on. You can sometimes, they'll more readily accept it than if you just were like, this is this way, like you're writing a history book. And so I got this, after the show, I'll send you a few chapters. I know you don't like to read whatever, so I'll just send you like 1 or 2 chapters. But anyway, I feel almost embarrassed that I missed not only this, but the story of the Watchers, this whole seed war that's still going on today. And it's, to me, it all started because I was researching for my book, and I wanted to get as many details about it correct as I possibly could, because the best fiction has lots of elements of reality to it, and history. So as I studied, I was like, wow, this isn't the Bible I remember. How did I miss this? How did I miss that? And it started with simple things from Trey Smith and his videos years ago, like, I don't know, almost 7-8 years ago, and then led to other people like Mike Heiser, Derek Gilbert. Some of these, I could name probably 10 other names as I'm studying all this. And then a friend of mine who runs a Prometheus Lens wrote his book, The Epic of Esau. And I think you were on his show recently. Anyway, Justin's a great guy, and I think his book is fantastic, the research he puts into it. But my point is, you miss all this unless you're digging in the details. And I appreciate so much guys like you that dig. And these stories give you goosebumps,
Yeah, I appreciate that, because again, like, I'm just a humble dude. I just started doing this and was like, man, this is a wild story, and like you mentioned, Joab and Benaiah, they, and talk about like glossing over. So you'll read about Joab and you'll, get some stuff, and then you'll see Benaiah did some wild stuff. Like David, he had his top 3, but then he had his royal council, because, he was King David. Joab was over all the host of Israel, and Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and the Perethites, or Pelethites, David's actual bodyguards. So these guys, beyond doing these phenomenal feats, they were, ranking officials. And that's what's so crazy about the mighty men is because, at least the way I was looking at it, like we hear about Goliath and a giant, and then of course people dissect it and say he may or may not have been a giant and all that. Not only did David assemble giants, it was an army, but like a respected army, like an actual army. Everybody had positions, and he was the general, and they looked at him like that. And that is a crazy thing to go from maybe there's one giant to there's thousands and thousands of families of giants that are just people on the earth, just eating and drinking, not doing evil or good, just existing. And when this conflict came through, because that's what happened. First, Saul was trying to kill David, then David's sons were trying to kill him. So, and that goes through the land. So then, these giants hear it and they pick a side, which is wild to think about that that's the actual story. And you know what I mean? It's not like what we hear about. So, and then on his royal council, which is going to open up to a whole lot of crazy things that we can go in any direction. We did
You
mention
go for it.
Melchizedek. So, he had Joab and Benaiah. And Benaiah, it's awesome because Benaiah killed 2 lion-faced men of Moab and a lion. And he also killed a goodly Egyptian, which translated as a giant Egyptian. That's a lot to unpack. Lion men and a giant Egyptian, right? Because up until then, we don't have any records of Egyptians being giants. Now we do. And then that word goodly is all over the Bible because Saul was a goodly man. He was shoulders and head taller than everyone in the land. David also was bad, and his wives came from Canaanite lands, and one of his sons was a goodly man. So he was adding to and continuing certain giant bloodlines. But he had a gentleman named Adoram. Now it's mentioned, it's spelled 3 different times, so it might be a title: Adoram, Hadoram, and Adorium. But all of them translate to Lord of Height. And he was over the tributes. Now, again, if we're not researching, it's like, oh, the tributes, okay, he was over tributes, blah. Tributes are forced labor from giant tribes from the promised land that were allowed to stay over. Solomon had 80,000 stone cutters, 70,000 stone carriers. And then the Gibeonites, a remnant of the Amorite giants, were promised to the lifelong tributes to the temple to be water carriers. So that's something too, a glossed over detail, that giants were allowed to stay over, but they had to, you're going to be here, you're going to work, you're going to help out. We're not going to deal with none of the crazy stuff. So he had a guy specifically over that. It would make sense that a giant would be over the giant tributes. Then he has a scribe, naturally, because these were stories that weren't wrote down. So it was a dude that, that orchestrate that. His 2 priests. This is another crazy detail. Every story in the Bible with the ark, beyond reverence, is we get the idea that it is a very heavy object, right? It's a big, heavy object. You have to be Levitical priests to actually to move it. And there's a story where the ark is in a cart and it tips, and a guy reaches over to catch it, but he's not a Levitical. Yep, he dies. Well, David has 2 priests that are in the Bible carrying it themselves over the shoulder. They are carrying the ark, which is a wild detail, but they are actually Kohanim priests, not Levitical priests. And then Ira, the Jerite, or a Yeri, which is a chief ruler about David. In Hebrew, Yeri is translated as forest, but the chief ruler is a Kohanim, and that is a specific non-Levitical priest that Melchizedek is also in order of. Is a certain, and that's going to go, it might be a little bit of a spider web at this point, but we can go into it because that goes into, like we were talking about with governments and the actual spiritual entities on this planet.
Yeah, you can go spider webbing all you'd like. Sure. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. So it does look like the incursion thing, right? That argument about multiple incursions and blah. I kind of figured none of us were there, so none of us actually know, right? You only know if you see it. But
I
I
don't
have
subscribe to any one particular version of that, by the way. I'm kind of like you. I've heard you in other interviews. I just feel like they've always been here. They're always messing with us. They're always tampering. I always think of the phrase from recently politically, build back better. So in their minds, because they saw this in the beginning, and the book of Job says they all sang and they were all excited about it until they found out, oh, we're going to give this over to this guy named Adam. And some of them are like, what? No, no. And so they've been tampering with it ever since. And I don't mean just us. They like wanted to recreate all of creation according to their own perspective, apart from Yahweh. We want to make it like this. We want to make these great, terrible lizards to feed our offspring because they're running out of food. They eat everything in sight. Whatever. And then today, who knows how they're screwing with us? It seems primarily genetic through all manner of things, from alien abduction to us using CRISPR to CERN. You name it, they give us technology. Who knows what we give them in return? We have missing people all over the planet. And in the graphic novel that I have, I talk about how Adam was made from dust, and the serpent and his offspring would feed on dust, crawl on their bellies and so on this earth. I feel like I heard you say once that these angels are tethered many times to God for their energy, their support, their life. But if you have left your first estate and you don't have that energy system to tap into, maybe since our life force, spirit force, since that's how they would receive their energy, is found in our blood, New Testament says that. And maybe that's why you have the story of vampires and the bathing in and drinking of blood, because it sustains them in some way, because our spirit force is found in there. I don't know. That's just me spitballing.
no,
Sorry to interrupt.
no, you're exactly it. And that's what's so crazy. So I started with the giants, and like I've been beating the giant drum for a minute. But I knew, well, I figured it out, that's why I started there, because it does literally branch from there. So if we can wrap our mind around that giants existed, lion-faced men existed, then we can kind of work backwards and break down the whole Nephilim thing. And the way I look at it now is very more complex than just this one word. But we get it from Hebrew, it's Ha-Nephel, which are the fallen ones. So that's where we get fallen angels. King James gives us sons of God. There's no record of angels actually being giants. So it's kind of like, well, what is this? Are they connected to the giants, right? Like it says it, and there's plenty of examples. David had he had the royal council, he had 37 mighty men. Then he had the dirty 30, I call them, from Ziklag, which included the 11 lion-faced warriors who separated themselves from the wilderness, meaning that there was a big pack. And those 11 guys were like, all right, we're taking David's side. So it's like, all right, is this all connected here? So I started to really kind of, like we mentioned the incursion thing, but then I'm gonna go into the princes thing, and that's what's going to tie it into Melchizedek, and that's when it kind of made, I look at it differently now. So Nephilim, the Ha-Nephel, was, if you want to say incursion, that's fine. It came down and it was a thing, but I think from there, it was naturally in our blood, and that's how these giants were just giants, and they weren't a part of, the evil and all that stuff. But you start really dissecting angels and stuff. Let me read 2 scriptures, and then we'll go from there. So Jeremiah 35:4. And I brought them into the house of the Lord, into the chamber of the sons of Hanan, the son of Igdaliah, a man of God, which was by the chamber of the princes. First Chronicles 29. And all the princes and all the mighty men and all the sons of the king David submitted themselves unto Solomon the king. Both of those scriptures are you got some issues there, right? Because they mention sons and princes. Aren't princes sons? Isn't that how that goes? So why is that a separate thing? So that's kind of was like, all right, so there's more to this giant thing. There's more to this angel thing than I'm aware of.
It made you want to look up definitions, right?
Yes, I went, because like the Cohen thing, like you always hear about Levitical priests, but how is there another a priestly line with Cohen? Doesn't make any sense. So in Hebrew, it's Saram. Princes is Saram. Daniel 10 Daniel 10, the story is Daniel's been reaching out, praying, I need help, blah. And the angel Michael comes down and says, hey, look, we've heard you, been trying to get down here for a minute. The evil prince of Persia wouldn't allow me to come through. I had to get Gabriel, blah. So you're telling me a prince, like Prince Charles, right? A dude was stopping Michael, the angel, and to the point where Michael had to get that doesn't make any sense. Again, just like the princes and the sun thing. So what it looks to be, and this ties into incursion, is we know of cherub, seraphim, watchers. We know about stuff like that. It looks like God appointed multiple spiritual entities on this planet. All the nations have princes. Shamash, right? The little g God that doesn't exist and it isn't real in the Bible. He has princes. Why would he have princes? And then you look at Melchizedek, the king of righteousness. If you break that down in Hebrew, it's Melchizedek. Now look at the story of Melchizedek. It's a battle of 5 giant kings. Sodom and Gomorrah, a bunch of stuff goes down. Melchizedek pops up. He's the king of righteousness of Salem. But then later on, we get the story of Adonizek. It's the same pattern. It's a story of giant kings. Adonizek is bad, though. But his name is My Lord is Righteousness. So how are these? So you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm finding these things that it's like continuity. Like, how this doesn't make sense. And that's when I started kind of taking a step back. It was like, this is just a way bigger picture than we're aware of. That literally God has appointed all of these different positions. And that's when I hit Psalm 76, where it says at the last says, I will cut off the spirit of the princes and be terrible to the kings. That's when it clicked. So God has appointed all of these positions. Even the stars are alive. Like, everything is alive and has spiritual, because that's how this machine works. That's how this engine works. Those are the valves. That's the camshaft. Is the different angels. The problem is God loved us so much that we have free will. So when the angels got down here, some of them were doing good. You got Melchizedek, who is a Cohen, who is the order of Melchizedek that Jesus, that Levitical comes from, not Levitical, the priest comes from. But then you've got Adonizek, same position, but he was bad, free will. So you see what I'm saying? Like, so that's when this thing really started like opening up. It was like, we really don't know what's been going down. And that's why we have these megalithic structures. And that's why we have all this stuff that can't be explained.
You know what it
Sorry
almost
to say
sounds
it.
like to me? What you're describing is, I think of Psalm 82, I think it is. And it almost sounds like what you're describing is that Melchizedek, whether it's a title or a name or some combination of both, might have been a member of the divine council who never turned against God. Not like he was a faithful angel, son of God, that wasn't like the other. And maybe that's why you have discrepancies between 70 and 72. Maybe 2 of them could have been like Melchizedek. And the other 70 were, of course, all ones that received worship from the nations, and God gave them over to humanity, over to these 70, because they decided to worship them as their gods, and chose Abram, son of a idol maker, to Nimrod for his folks. But the amazing thing is like you said, it seems like, and one of the funny things to me is that when I read these things is, we read it today like, oh my gosh, but when they write it back then, it's like they were just writing about, today we're going to have cloudy skies and rain today. And by the way, this event happened. Like, it was just commonplace for there to be giants and angels and things walking among us. And the only reason I can think that they're not obvious about it today is that it's being restrained until the restrainer's taken out. And then we're going to have all hell break loose again at some point.
The story with Adonizek, the end of that
Did I jump
battle.
too far ahead?
No, you're good, brother. I love bouncing around. So anybody that doesn't, I'm sorry, but I love it, because that's a hard thing for me is once I figured out this, it's every book. So it's hard for me to not bring it all in, because it's one big story.
I think
But
Heiser says it's the giant story, or Genesis 6 and what all that stuff is like the Rosetta Stone of what really happened. And there's another gentleman, I think it was Heiser again, who did that famous podcast he did about when today's churches talk about the gospel, they missed the entire epilogue and preface to all of it. It's like most Christians only know the last 15 minutes of the film, and they forgot all the unedited version of 2 hours and 45 minutes that preceded why Jesus did what he did. You know, then they miss out on the context of things like the son and the prodigal son, and that how that's really more than likely about our elder siblings, the sons of God, and us, or the parable of the wheat and the tares. We all think it's that bad family over there that claims to love God, but I think wheats and tares may be people who are human and people who appear to be human and may not be human at all, or not fully human. And maybe that's what these abduction, you hear, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but these abduction stories seem to look for certain bloodlines, people missing, like in the 411 series. Remember that guy did a episode, and they all seem to be from this one German family that had a specific blood type, and so there's obviously some sort of biological DNA, which, by the way, I just discovered absorbs and gives off light recently, going on in the world. It's not just a spiritual struggle. It's a combination of spiritual and physical warfare going on here, because we have a bunch of rebellious gods that don't like what was done in the past, and they want this place for their own. And by golly, they're going to do whatever they can to have our birthright taken away from us and have us replaced with their own idea, or build back better, like I said earlier. And maybe they think, and somehow that helps them to win. I can't think of any other reason why they think they can, but maybe they feel like the battlefield is us. And if they can, an analogy I used with my wife one day is both of us could probably resist torture to the end if it was just us being tortured, whatever. But you take my child out in front of me and you threaten to torture my child, I would be likely to spill the beans. And so maybe that's their hope, is that by turning us into something that's no longer human, they not only grieve the Lord greatly, because we know from either the Book of Giants or Enoch that part of what they were doing before the flood was intentional to provoke the Lord. They're still doing it today with the idea that they can replace us. Like Tim Alberino says in his book, Birthright, they want us to be legally replaced. And they are all very concerned about legalities, because they know that's how God operates. And if they can perform some level of legal trickery, they own this place and they win.
Well, you think about, like, what was the motivation to actually put the first person to pass their child through the flames? Like literally, what was the motivation to literally be like, all right, we need some rain to put our kid in the fire and just call it? Where does it
come from? Yeah, I think that all the time too. Who thought that initially? Hey, let me place my child on this boiling hot bronze altar to be incinerated. Oh, and I don't want to hear the scream, so let's make a bunch of drumming noise so I don't have to hear it. I mean, where do you get that from?
Like what you just said, the drums. Who would have thought, like, all right, well, you know what? They're going to be screaming, right? Or maybe they found out like then and was like, all right, just do some drums. Like, all of that stuff is not like organic.
No, not at all.
Moses is up on Sinai and they're down there and they're like, well, he's not coming back. Well, we need a God, and all of that crazy stuff. And the actual translation is he didn't hear singing and dancing. It was a paganistic sexual ritual. Where'd that come from? This is all motivation. That's why I'm so passionate about the princes and the king thing, because I think that's the answer, is that angels were just here on the earth. Say angel at this point is a very, very vague word. We have to understand that, because it's just different entities, spiritual entities, I probably should say.
Yeah, it's like saying a dog. I mean, there's 8 million breeds of dogs and different sizes, shapes.
Yeah. But when you dive into it, there's so much more evidence that spiritual beings just on the earth for different reasons. And when you read the stories, like the king of Tyre in Ezekiel, he used to be a cherub in the garden. And it's like, well, clearly he had some bad motivation. I could imagine what it was, because he's a king. And that's my thing with government, like we were talking about before, is because my entire life, for what that's worth, like, that's never felt normal. Like, this life, the way we live and the way we're supposed to live and have to live doesn't feel normal. It could be nothing, but to me at this point now, I do believe that it is something. Like, this is not the way that God had intended, and He says it lots and lots of times. You don't need a king. You're going to be governed like the rest of the nations. I'm your king, and what that means is, like, what's being done to us? Where are we at? Are we happy? Are they actually looking out for us? Clearly not. But there's so much evidence of them being on the earth and in motivating. Where does this stuff come from? How do we decide? And how does things just keep rolling the way they do? Because of that, like in your notes you sent me was something really good about how, it's always saying, be careful, you might be talking to an angel. That is a very heavy statement. So something I always go back to, like with the king and princes, is Jesus is king of king, prince of princes, right? So you're telling me that the Son of God that transcended and all of the everything that's involved there and how powerful that is, he's better than King Charles? Doesn't that seem like apples and oranges? Because kings and princes were spiritual beings. That's why he's the King of Kings, Prince of Princes, because these are, again, spiritual beings appointed through the nations. In Revelation, a good one to go to, Revelation, in my Anunnaki notes I got right here, is Revelation 1:20, where it was talking about the candlesticks. This is the meaning of the 7 stars you see in my right hand and these 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the leaders of these 7 churches. The 7 candlesticks are the churches themselves. Well, in Hebrew, they are the Malachim, the angels of the Keliot, the congregations. So God, 7 nations, 7 continents, God appointed 7 leaders, 7 angels over each 7 nations, right? All this is connected. All of it, how does it run without him having to be here just continually hitting the plates? Because
Part of the thing that is sort of terrifying about that, like you're saying, and how heavy that verse out of Hebrews is when Jesus walked the earth, and he's the creator of everything, and all things were created by him, through him, for him, Alpha and Omega, the Word. If you had walked by him and didn't know who he was, you would have mistaken him for a human being. King of Tyre, same sort of thing. The Prince of Persia, and Joshua, that captain of the host of the Lord, Jacob wrestling with a man, that 4th man in the fire. Folks, they all look human. And you would never know. And Hebrews even tells you. I know in Sunday school you think, oh, that they only appear as an angel that helps you change a tire on a busy interstate and they disappear. No. You have no idea how long they stay, whether they ever fully reveal themselves in different ways. But in the past, in the ancient times, we know that they were the heroes, the stars, the political leaders, the kings, the princes. And so when you look at all of our people in leadership positions today, do you really think they care about you? No, they're all pushing for one thing, and that is their novus ordo seclorum. At some point, they want a one world government, and they're going to have it, and it's going to fail spectacularly. We're told, because it is the worst time ever for everybody, including them, ever in history other than the flood.
You know what's really interesting? You mentioned the 4th in the fire. What I noticed was really crazy was Nebuchadnezzar recognized that as a son of God, as an angel.
Yeah, isn't that weird? He knew. He didn't like, whoa, what is that? He immediately, and that's what I meant about earlier, about the news reporting like this was all just commonplace. Folks, I think it was commonplace. Like, if you want to call them the gods, I know they're not gods, they're godlings, as somebody recently said. Little g god wannabes or whatever. Basically angels that receive worship who shouldn't be. But they walked among us in many very strange ways, because we can see the artwork in every single culture on this planet. And they created some really strange things, like the Rakshasas, from India, these super wise beings with tiger heads that had telepathy and the ability to perform magic. And, you can call us crazy. I think these things were real and historic, and they walked among us at one time, but they have slowly either phased out for some reason, or they're living somewhere else, like possibly under the earth and hiding. Who knows? And maybe that's why so many billions have been spent by governments building massive structures under the earth. It might not just be from hiding natural catastrophe. It could be that they know they exist too. They're in league with them, and they're learning things from them, like our lovely new possible UAPs that are really just humans getting technology from these beings, where we're learning how to use electromagnetic fields to generate propulsion without G-force. All kinds of crazy things like this, just like they did in the Old Testament, where the rebellious sons of God said, I will teach you these things, how to make, great swords, and maybe some eyeshadow, which I always thought was weird. Let me teach you how to kill yourself with swords. Oh, and the ladies, you get eyeshadow.
Yeah,
And
perfume,
right. And so I don't know. So it's bizarre, but it's like there's a trade-off, right? They give us technology and we give them something in return. And I think it's pledges of either worship or our sons and daughters, just like with Molech.
So, and one other point, and then I want to go into something you just made me think of, because I'm rethinking something that I read. But one more point with the recognizing angels. Gideon is I believe we can confirm Gideon was a giant. An angel comes to him, says, "Oh, Gibor, we see you and we're going to work with you." But in his story, the two princes of Midianites, the two princes of Midian, the Midianites, he's talking to them, and they say that they just were in a battle, and they say that they look like you. They resembled a king, resembled a child of a king. So, right, how the Midianites are not Israelites, they're not God-fearing people, and they see Gideon, this Gibor, and say immediately, well, they look like you, look like child of a king, just like Nebuchadnezzar. How did he recognize? But, so there's something in Ezekiel that you're the second time now where somebody mentioned 70 ancients in a conversation. So I started to rethink something that I found in Ezekiel. So in Ezekiel, awesome book, incredible book. In Ezekiel 8, God says, I want to show you a bunch of abominations. So you come with me, I'm going to show you some crazy stuff. He tells them to dig through a wall, and you will see abominable desolations. And Ezekiel says, I saw all forms of creeping things and abominable beasts and idols on the wall. And then he saw Jaazaniah, the son of Shaphan, surrounded by 70 ancients. And I hit that a bunch of different times. It's ancient ones or ones of the ancients. Like, that's clearly the point that they're saying. It's 70 ancients. Again, you're the second person. And this is the way that this goes for me. People will say stuff and it's like, okay, it's the second time that 70 ancients has been mentioned. Now, let me step back. In Ezekiel, the four living creatures, four living beings, four living creatures, they're mentioned twice. For everybody that's not familiar, it's the gigantic angelic beings with wheels like a gyro, looking like a propulsion system, and they have four faces each. They're mentioned twice, and both times all of the same faces, except the difference is one is the face of an ox, and then the
Yes.
second time is the face of a cherub. Now, when I figured that out, I saw some scholar arguments that it wasn't a mistranslation or whatever. That was the actual face. That cherubs actually have ox faces, like animal faces. I was like, well, that is really interesting. Maybe certain angelic beings, cherub, if you will, are actual animalistic features. Like Baal, Molech, the devil's the goat and all that stuff. So I kind of I was there and I figured that out. But the 70 ancient ones made me rethink that whole thing with Ezekiel. What if, so let me say this first. It's not actual abominable desolation. In Hebrew, it's toevat herot. Toevat is abominable, like evil, but herot, hera is Hebrew to conceive.
Sexual. Yeah.
Yes, it is to conceive. So it is a abominable sexual ritual in some fashion. And this is where I'm rethinking it. What if what they were actually doing was trying to replicate the angelic beings? Because Nebuchadnezzar was able to recognize that fourth angel. The Midianites clearly were able to recognize spiritual beings. What if that was a thing that we've missed in translation, that in some fashion they had revealed themselves to somebody in some way? That was how they recognized it. Wouldn't that explain the bird heads and all that in Egypt? So what if that conception ritual was not just a normal conception ritual like I initially thought? What if that 70 ancient ones was ancient angelic knowledge, 70 from the bad, the tens of thousands of angels that rebelled. And that's where they were trying to splice their own Nephilim. Kind of crazy, right?
No, not at all. I've often thought that myself, not based off of the Ezekiel 8, but other things. I feel like blood rituals may only go so far for while they're alive for 120 years, or possibly that's one speculation. But maybe they need to reconstitute themselves. And obviously, since they're disconnected from God, they don't have the kind of access that an obedient angel would be having, going through portals or these rainbow-like ladders, perhaps, that are described throughout history by different cultures, the Rainbow Bridge, or, the Vikings and whatever. But it seems like maybe they need an Oikotarian. They need a container to keep here on this planet since they left there first. And maybe they just reconstitute themselves. And that's why people like maybe Tyler Hansen, who does all those face mismatched things that I think are sometimes crazy, but sometimes it's like, and maybe what you're saying is the same beings reconstituting themselves through sexual ritual, which is why we have, if you go back and look at Aleister Crowley, and you look at the Jet Propulsion guy, whose name is eluding me at the moment, and what were they primarily concerned about? Some sort of Babylonian or other sexual ritual of some sort that brings, and another thing, I know I'm jumping, but they're all related, the obelisks over the pregnant belly of the dome and the water and all of that seems to allow permission, which I think these beings legally have to have, or they get tossed into chains, possibly. They know that they can't just do whatever they want. It seems like permission is required from humanity since we have the birthright to this planet. There's some level of permission, and one of the things they fear greatest is a human being that knows that they can pray to dismantle their plans to some degree, especially one fasting and really appealing to God. And so I think what they're really doing is creating a body for them to re-inhabit, because their time is limited in sections somehow. And so that's what they do. And oftentimes you'll see like a character in a painting from the 1200s who looks just like an actor or actress today, like their clone, and they could be and I know I'm just conjecturing and spitballing here, but I'm doing it based off of evidence.
Yeah, no
so,
knowledge.
Yeah. And so the thing is you see this and you're like, are they just living among us and having to do rituals and permission-based things that require blood and sex and all these strange things in order for them to maintain their life properly here on Earth? And when they pass, they can come back. And that's why we also have all these strange stories from the ancients about reincarnation. Humans aren't meant for reincarnation. No. But we have stories of it because Nephilim spirits don't necessarily go anywhere. According to Enoch, they remain here as demons, roaming spirits that remind me of the pirates from the Pirates of the Caribbean. They can't enjoy the sinful lusts that they crave after without either possessing a human or finding some other way to reconstitute themselves in some way, which I think is far more difficult for them than it is an angel or a principality or a power or a prince who has some abilities they don't. And but anyway, again, I think that may be related with the, like the Babylon working sexual ritual, all these different things that involve the bizarre, creepy scene described in Ezekiel with creepy, crawly creatures and weirdness in these 70 principalities, if you want to call them that, rebellious sons of God, standing around, guiding it, teaching it, and helping them to know what to do so that they can get permission to either come back in physical form, which they seem to desire for whatever reason. I don't know 100% why, but it seems to be their thing.
Well, doesn't it give more credence to the pigs and Legion, right? Because
it does, especially if what you've said about the is it Amalekites? It's true
Amalekites.
About their genetics restructuring of hogs or whatever.
Yeah, like
tell them about it.
It's all connected. That's the thing. Like, again, we laugh about spider webs, but this whole big story is very complex. Like the Amalekites, the only tribe in the Bible that are literally called to die. The entire everything, man, woman, child, ox and suckling, everything has to go. Outside of the Bible, they are literally accepted as the lickers of blood. Midrashi mentions them to be shapeshifters, like Jewish knowledge, old school Jewish lore, like it's based on something. Not for me to say, but you know what I mean? It is what it is. But then you look at another situation with the pigs. When they went into the pig, they requested the pigs. I think that maybe they didn't mean to drown. Like we take the story as that was an on-purpose thing. Rethinking that, maybe that wasn't it, and that they assumed that. Let me explain the Malachite first before I say that. So Amalekites, it is speculated that God made the boar, and that the Amalekites, through their shape shifting and rituals and stuff, they actually genetically made the pig. That's why the pig is a very smart animal, and why the skin is very close to human skin, and that's why it's against Mosaic law. The one animal you cannot eat, other than fouling or whatever, is
It's
this.
also one of the few animals that you can do a heart transplant with.
Yes, yes. So it's speculated that that's because of the Amalekites. And then that would make sense to me why they went into the pigs, because they recognized the human element to that. But because they weren't humans and that they were a cross genetically made pig, that they couldn't handle the spiritual aspect, and then they just scattered, accidentally falling into the water. One crazy thing about that story is that that's the only time that Jesus says to tell people what happened. Every other time, Jesus is like, hey, don't just between us, just go and do your thing, right? He says to that dude, go home, tell everybody what God did for you. That's a big, big thing, because Jesus was not about the flashy stuff. So it was I feel like more of like, go spread the word what happened. Tell everybody what happened. You want to hop in some pigs? Tell everybody what happened.
You know
We're
what
going
that
to
just made me
stop all
think?
this.
That like what you I have known that what you're saying. I knew that aspect of it. It was the one few times, and we know that part of that reason is he wasn't ready to be revealed, but not in this case particularly. I think maybe what he was doing wasn't for human consumption, but letting the spirit world and putting them on notice right there. Yeah, it's me, buddy, and I'm not happy.
Yeah, we ain't doing this no more. Yes. Yes. And that all goes to the animal thing. Like, why the animals? Why the animals? That may be something a little bit too far for us to contemplate, but I do really think that there's a heavy spiritual connection, at least in God's eyes, between humans and animals. Not that he sees us together as the same thing, but we're not angelic. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like in his world. So that would make sense why, you see a lot of animal imagery with spiritual, like Jesus in Revelation is the head of a lamb, and why the cherub possibly is actually the face of an ox. That if that is true, doing the work thing, are there more pieces? We see, just like in Ezekiel, there's a lot of animal ritual activity. That would, to me, mean that that's knowledge that they have, that they've passed down, that we don't actually know. You know what I mean? Because for lots of good humanly reasons, we don't know what our replicable systems will work with what animals. Like, we don't know, and it's a good thing we don't know. We don't know that our sperm will actually work with a kangaroo, because that's horribly disgusting. But it might be a perfect match embryo wise, because we were all made in the same factory. But that's spiritual knowledge that we wouldn't have, and hopefully we never, ever, ever have, knock on everything. But you know what I'm saying? That would, to me, tie into why Jesus was like, yo, tell everybody what happened. Go ahead and spread the word, new man on campus. You know what I'm saying? That would make sense why that would be with the pig story, this random odd story. Because Michael Heiser, he's the one that's attributed to it. If it's weird, it's meant to be.
Absolutely, I love that line. He put the bulls
Yeah.
of Bashan on notice, right?
Dude, and that's so crazy too. Bulls of Bashan. Gigantic bulls of Bashan. What's up with that? Oh, and to tie in with Bulls of Bashan, the Oaks of Mamre. Very at the beginning. Abram, before he became Abraham, he pitched his tent, hung out with Mamre. He had a confederation of Amorites. Mamre had the Oaks of Mamre, and we think about those giant stones that possibly are old trees and stuff like that. But then, so is Mamre, Eshel, and Anur, his three brothers. Well, the spies got the grapes from the Valley of Eshel, right? So those are two examples of Amorite giants, if I can say it, experimenting with vegetation.
Absolutely. And we have evidence of that in both the Book of Giants and Enoch, where it talks about how they sinned against all of creation, plant life, animals, all of it. And I kind of have a theory that the angels who lusted after women, so they obviously had some sort of reproductive organ prior to that, or how do you lust, like Tim Alberino says. Maybe when they came here, they, unlike us, might have had an ability, like a universal genetic marker within their DNA, to be able to breed with anything, animal, human, you name it, which is why we have strange, centaurs or these things that are bullheaded, which would make sense if an ox is one of the faces of the cherub and they can come. I think they're shapeshifters too. They can come and appear that way if they want, or appear more human, which is why we have minotaurs and all these bizarre creatures from the ancient past described. I think it's because angels, these rebellious sons of God, wanted to because there's a story Derek Gilbert brings up about one of these beings. I don't know if it was a demigod, already created, or if it was one of these rebellious angels mating with an ox over by Mount Hermon, and was busy with it all day and night or something like that. There's no telling what that kind of thing produced on this planet and why God had to reset. And here we are toying with CRISPR in a different way, because I think God has restrained that. Through, because wherever you find the church and Christianity in its real form, it seems like this activity is greatly restrained. But you go to places where we're not, and it's dark, and you hear stories of dark things. And I think they're just, biding their time until we're not present to possibly, screw things up for them. And I don't know if you have any views on this. But one of the things I found interesting is from the Old Testament, you don't have a whole lot of stories of demonic possession, right? Even after the flooding, you have all these spirits that have been, roaming the earth, and they're not sure what to do and so on. And it seems like at first, maybe out of fear of trying to possess a human, for being locked away like some of their other brethren might have been, they enter idols, or because we have example after example of, these people, these tribes meeting with their ancient ancestors, either through talking idols or statues or things that they built to reconnect with them in some way, But at some point, somebody taught them, because where does this come from, right? Somebody must have pointed out to them that if they want to be able to experience the lustful things they experienced while they were physical, they can take over a human host, just like their daddies, because we know, Lucifer entered, a number of different people, including, who was the betrayer, Judas, in order to accomplish his greatest catastrophe ever, basically building his own gallows by having Jesus bumped off in physical form. So it just makes me wonder, I know that was a lot of spider webbing also, but what are your thoughts on when do you think that demon possession became fully known and maybe taught by their angelic parentage on a means by which they could accomplish? Because it seems like it just exploded somewhere prior to Jesus coming on the scene, right? It was obviously commonplace, and now it's not so much, but it seems to be returning, like I said, in areas where you don't find a Christian influence. These demons get permission somehow. You either give it to them somehow, either purposefully or not, to get certain things like the ability to, astrally project or do that. Who's that guy that's been going around that's used to be with the Department of Defense, and he's allegedly going out to the 3-eye atlas thing and far-seeing, or what do they call that?
Remote viewing?
Remote viewing, yes.
Yeah.
And I think they get that from things they're not supposed to be getting powers from. But I do think it's a real thing. So it's been around since Project Montauk, right? And probably before that. It's just these beings just keep teaching us this stuff for whatever trade-off they get.
Yes. So yes, we're gonna do some spider webs on that. So remote viewing, it's just like, I'll say this, just like non-canonical books. I heard something one time, and it kind of struck me. Because this is all like super spiritual. We have to accept that what we see is the physical, the human realm, because we're not the spiritual, so we can't see it. But there's a lot of crazy stuff behind the scenes. certain books can have spiritual bindings in them to where it may not hit everybody, but it might hit that one person that happens to read it, and it puts a spiritual seed, and things get repeated or things get changed. I think it was actually this guy, not Isaac, and blah. Just like remote viewing, there's things that we can be shown, and we have to be careful because this is my opinion for how I look at things. We are right smack dab in the middle of a heavy spiritual war, and there's no other way to look at it. Good is really, really good. Good loves us. Good wants good things. Evil is evil. Evil wants horrible things. Wants us to die. Wants us to kick rocks. The worst of the worst. So if you know the motivation, I think that we should kind of be cautious. I'll say this, cautious of things that we're seeing when it's not God, because Jesus says it. It's mentioned that there are spiritual abilities. There's healing abilities. There's tongues. There's to translate tongues. There's lots of possession, exorcism, I should say. It's a God-given talent. It says it, but it comes from God. So if we're not getting something specifically from him, because I've had this conversation with some friends of mine about certain things, and I believe it all exists, but good comes from
Yeah,
good.
why would
bad
you
is-
warn people not to engage in necromancy unless it, unless it was something you could actually do? I mean, God
Right?
doesn't tell you not to do things you can't do.
I mean, he's very specific to not eat blood. Right? To your point, very specific. I kind of feel like that's a one, hey, don't do this, and like that's that. But it's a constant thing. But then here we are in 2025, and we understand coagulation, we understand blood, and we understand what it does when you consume it. So can you imagine being on a pure blood diet through generations? Right? I mean, so we know that. So those are those things that are there. They are real. And we have to just be careful, because at the end of the day, this is warfare. If the evil can knock some of us off, it doesn't matter what happens to us if we get knocked off. It's not like, cool, I got Adam, so I'm gonna keep hammering him. No, it's like, all right, cool, I'm getting robbed next. Like, it's just a continuing thing. I just say that. This is how I feel. It's what's on my heart. Is like the remote viewing. What if hypothetically somebody was like you do your thing, and you go somewhere and you do see some stuff, and you're being shown a false interpretation, right, of whatever it is, and then you go out and you're like, yo, there's life on Mars. We've all heard that. Like, there was life on Mars, and there was a battle on Mars. Man, I saw it. I went there, and here's my coordinates, and blah blah blah. It's not my place to say whether you saw it or not, but it is my place to say that story's going to get repeated. And then somebody somewhere is going to be on their brink of like, all right, is there God or is there not God? And then they hear that and they're like, blah, blah, and they go this direction. And all it is the evil just checking somebody off, plain and simple.
That totally
So that's kind
makes
of how I
sense.
look, right? That's how I look at that stuff. Because again, I believe it. It's a very, very spiritual world. Possession is a great point too, because if you notice, to your point, it wasn't an Old Testament thing. It was a heavy New Testament thing. And now here we are in some circles, even questioning if it's real. Like, a lot of people is like, well, it's not really a thing. And do you believe in exorcism? Blah. How is it that it wasn't, then it was huge, and now it's a figment of our imagination? Because there's more to it. And I would absolutely believe possession, just like we talk about Legion and go and tell this story, is because that was probably how a lot of stuff got done back in the day, and how it's getting done now is, I don't want to name any political figure, but what if they are possessed and they're a vessel? Because we're vessels. It is what it is. Like, we can all agree what we were talking about earlier about hearing stuff. And like, is it what I'm hearing, or is it, if you're in tune, you're in tune, homie? Like, we can talk about that, of hearing things. I got crazy stories, but it's legit. And then of course humans have their own intent. And I'll tell you what, if anybody's like I meant to say earlier, motivation, when we were talking about how things happen, is, as a manager, the employees that I've had in my career that were heavily money motivated aren't always the happiest employee, because there's never enough money. There's never enough money. Doesn't matter if you get a $5 raise and you get 30 hours of overtime. You'll still come home and be like, man, I wish I had more. The people that are motivated by accomplishment or happiness or love, those are the happy employees, because no one wants to go to work. So if you enjoy work, you're more productive. It is what it is. Evil can find our motivations too. So how did that first person decide to put their child through the flames? I would guarantee it would have some possession, have some kind of demonic motivation behind it. Because how does that spur to become a thing? And then who decides? Well, we just get some drums. Cain, remember Cain? Cain, the bad dude at the very beginning, wasn't one of his sons noted as being the inventor of music instruments? I guess we can confirm that I love music, you love music, but certain music has a evil connotation from the very beginning, right? And we're not going to go tinfoil hat with. I don't know if you know Ian Carroll, and he talks a lot about hip hop music and how that's a vessel right now. Just because it's a popular music has nothing to do with the music. It's just popular, so it's a vessel. Yes. A lot of times that is how these things are tipped into our society.
Yeah, the whole Laurel Canyon thing, music scene, where all those famous 70s guys or 60s guys were, all their parents were military intelligence and CIA officials, and they all just suddenly became incredibly popular musicians.
At the same time, on the same road, right? They all moved to the same place and they did the same, and then they all died early, or most of them
So,
died early.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because that too, that outside, if it's true in here, as heavy of a story as it is, there's going to be massive patterns and pieces in real life, right? And there clearly is. There clearly is. Why, like, Hollywood is just not good, even though we talk about cool movies and stuff like that. There's intent. There's it's an agency, right? They have an agenda.
And once
Music's
your eyes are open to this, though, it's like you can't watch Netflix or movies anymore without seeing the number patterns, the communications, an apartment with like F on it. Well, why would they choose 3F as the apartment number? I can't even imagine. Or, so many fees and everything. It's like my wife and I can't even watch a Netflix show or a movie anymore without seeing these things. It's like a veil is taken away from your eyes and you see through their BS.
dude, and
It's
we
crazy.
don't have to go down this road, but they're so pushing the transhuman thing right now.
Absolutely.
And we're not talking about, good, right? We're not getting into that. We're just stating facts that it is a heavy push. Why, right? Like, if it's a natural thing, why do you have to really, really push it, right? Like Christianity, you just see the point I'm making, but
They don't want us to be human anymore.
Gosh,
Humans have the birthright.
Dude, and that's what it is. It's just trying to take it from us. But again, like we talked about earlier, it's so interesting that a lot of that is like blending of genes and stuff, right? It's just really weird how that's the push, of that. It's like it's got to be behind it, and it is, like we said, just trying to take dominion from us and then dilute what humans are. It's really, really crazy time right now, man.
I agree, and I think in this ongoing battle war, seed war is what I call it, it seems like one of the most effective moves outside of our Lord's death, burial, and resurrection is he really put the enemy on its heels at Babel, confusing the languages, pushing them off in different directions, because it caused them to, and it seems also like they weren't able to breed as well. Like Gary Wayne makes that point in his, 8 million page long books, which I say that only in jest, but they're really great books. I read part of the first one and I've read the second one because it seemed more accessible. But anyway, it just seems like, I don't know, I've kind of lost my train of thought where I was going with this, but it feels like our elder siblings are always trying to remove our birthright from us. And they do it in various ways all throughout time. In the pre-flood world, it was their heyday. At the Tower of Babel, they were trying to unite us in the initial Novus Ordo Seclorum, and it failed. And that caused them to try to have to redo it over centuries. And I think they might have been successful here and there, but God always stops it. That's why I don't believe that, people who, and I don't know if you do or not, but the whole Satan's Little Season thing, I could see why people would think, with the melted structures like Petra, heat from the sky, things of this nature, that they might consider that as an option. But I feel like the better option is that these rebellious little g gods have been doing this, trying to have their global governance and stealing of the birthright ever since the beginning, and they're still doing it. And at some point, they will have their 7-year heyday that is still for dealing with the sins of God's people. And I know there's also arguments about that. I realize the church is neither Jew nor Greek, and we are the chosen people, but there is still this prophetic week of years, I think, with 1 week left, where God deals with that. And it's just a culminating story. And I feel like these rebellious sons of God have been trying to do this all throughout history, which is why you see all this weirdness, from the bizarre Chicago fairs to the orphan trains and the having to repopulate the earth to some degree in the late 17 to 1800s. All these strange things that you hear about, even if they're only half true, are bizarre. And I think it's because we have things that are not human living amongst us as humans, and we have for some time. And even when we talk about even more crazier things like lizard people or Dracos or whatever, seraphim were lizard-like in appearance and possibly shapeshifters. So they would have had a lizard-like appearance and might be what people are thinking are these lizard people or whatever. And then I think about dragons and how they're venerated in the East. And there's a story somewhere, I can't remember where it's from, about supposedly, I don't think it uses Noah's normal name or Noah, but it talks about his dragons defending against an army that comes to assault him, and dragons defend Noah. And maybe some of them were just like the giants. Maybe some of them were good, and they went into the East to help the original emperors deal with the floodwaters that they didn't know how to fix. Because there's a story about that in ancient Chinese literature, that something came along and taught them how to deal with the waters. And it might have been these seraphim, because, watchers aren't said to be one particular class of angels. So some of them could have been seraphim. And maybe they had the ability to change from, because I know ancient Chinese literature says that they can go from a dragon shape to a human shape. And we see that even in movies. So it may not be so crazy that these emperors had shape-shifting dragon-like beings with wisdom that came and taught them how to fix their land. I don't know. Again,
Yeah.
more conjecture on my part and spitballing, but you get the idea.
I mean, you're there on it, and you just made me think. So Benaiah killed 2 lion-faced men of Moab, 2. But Moab was a gigantic tribe and monumental, and they were all the way into to Nehemiah. They were so big that some were good, some were bad. But Deuteronomy 23 says that the Moabites and the Ammonites are not allowed in the temple even after the 10th generation. So
That's right.
Yes, that cannot be birthed out. That is a forever unclean birth. And that's what that means. It's unclean. It can't go into the temple, because temples, you can't be disfigured or whatever. But Benaiah only killed 2 lion-faced men, right? But after the 10th generation, they're still not allowed out. So that means that obviously it was more lion-faced men, right? It was just thousands of however many, whatever. 11 lion-faced Gadite warriors, Gad being a tribe of Israel, joined David. Well, I mentioned them earlier, but it says specifically that they left the wilderness. Like I said earlier, they left however big of a tribe. So that's 2 different tribes, possibly very, very, very large tribes of lion men, right? Isaiah 34, when Edom gets their punishment, the only thing that'll be left in the land is the Lilith spirit. So it's not technically Lilith, but I think it has something to do with it. It's a night creature. It mentions wildcats, or the Ayim, which are more animalistic, just not lion-faced. And then the Sair, which is a he-goat, where male goat is actually referred to. So it is a specific he-goat, like Pan and all that. Leviathan, Behemoth, but there's also actually a Rahab, AB, and it's different from all the other Rahabs. It's only mentioned one, maybe twice, but it is another sea creature. Leviathan is God made Leviathan, God made Behemoth. God did not make Rahab. Rahab was a bad sea creature that he killed. When it's referred to as that's what it is God even killed Rahab, blah. So these are all good examples of multiple animal people, not just one or two here and there, tribes and tribes and tribes. In Isaiah 34, the specific of that is saying that that'll be all that's left over. After Edom's gone, the only thing left over is these wild beasts. So that means, if you can speculate, Edom life was normal to have wild animal, the wild cats and the side. It's just a normal life to the point that they weren't bad. So when Edom's gone, that's the only thing that'll be left over. So those are examples of a very medieval life back in the day of these crazy animal features, animal people all over the planet. Where did that come from?
I know, and every culture has paintings of them. Every culture. Just like, people argue, like, okay, so if we said this to Answers in Genesis, they would think we're ridiculous, right? But they make the same argument about, as part of their evidence for a global flood, is that every culture discusses a global flood. Well, every culture discusses giants, crazy lion-headed and dog-headed people, cat-headed people, tiger-headed people, people who are, I can't remember what they're called, but they're half snake and half human, slithering around with a snake body and a human torso and a head, you name it. And the thing is they're not like us. It's not like they're recording this and writing this as if it's a story of fiction. They're recording it as something that is a real event, like you talking about construction down the road in your local community. And that's how they write about it. They're not writing about it as some sort of fantastic, bizarre story. It's like they're recording history, not, and just because our reality currently doesn't appear that way openly doesn't mean it won't always. Life could get really weird for us too. So it's good to know these things. And I don't know what we would possibly do about it if it did start occurring today, other than stay indoors. But I believe that that's true. And I so hate it when we see translations of the Bible that will take what you just described about Edomites and Edom, and instead of using the original intention of the Hebrew authors of what they were saying, they change it to a normal animal that they were familiar with, rather than what it really is saying. Drives me crazy.
It's wild. So like, it's hard to put it into words of like how this thing really looked, what was really going on, what's the story here, why. You just made me think of something that went right out of my head. But it was basically like the flood story and the commonality of what we see all over the place. Dogmen and the story with Othniel, the first judge, being a possibly lion man and all that. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but yeah, there's so much.
Fat guy in the gut, and the sword swallowed his.
Yes,
the guy's gut swallows the sword. I mean, what a story, man! It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh goodness,
so
horrible, but great.
Yeah, it's just nuts, man. And that's what was so fulfilling for me, was to kind of get some answers. That was the main thing for me on this, was like, what, again, going back to like, I don't feel like life is the way it's supposed to be, the way it is. Remember what I was going to say. I remember exactly what I was going to say. It's interesting, everything we've laid out about the animals and all this crazy stuff. And that around that time, at the end, when it's the main point is that Egypt will be a wasteland. Egypt will be a wasteland. All these surrounding areas will be a wasteland, a desolation. When final judgment comes through, isn't it ironic that Egypt had to be dug out? That's how we know about Egypt, that it had to be dug out. All of these structures had to be dug out. To me, and I haven't gotten to Revelation as heavy as I want to, and I'm going to. I think that's going to be next. I think that there's a good possibility that we are in halfway through. We are in the 1,000 years, because that was the whole thing of the lead up to, was final judgment in these areas, and all of them were dug out. And that's why how there's so many maps of giants and giant lands, 1500, 1600, 1800, all the way up. You've heard my thing about Chesapeake Bay and Jamestown and all that stuff. But then in 1900, because you mentioned it, the Chicago's World Fair, there was something up with that in the Arcturus star that in my opinion, that was the revamp to get to the next part of the revelation, basically. The Arcturus
that is a bizarre story. Yes.
1893 was the first World's Fair. Then in 1933, they tracked the Arcturus star, which is in the Bible, and they harnessed energy from 4 different observatories from this Arcturus star to light up for a novelty for the World's Fair. But if you look at all of the memorabilia, all these pamphlets and all this stuff, everything was like a heavy push for a new way of thinking. It's really, really odd that they would do this one thing based on all this other stuff, the Tartarian argument and all that. But everything was like a push for following directions, basically. Like even I have a video on it if anybody wants to see it, where it's like this picture of like a I will on the hat, and it's the motto is following science, following this new way of thinking. It's like whatever happened, the whole great deception and all that, we all can agree Federal Reserve, all that stuff happened right around the time of this new push. So now you're crazy if you believe in giants. You create mythology. It's mythology. But that argument doesn't hold up, because in the Department of Education system, why is that still pushed? Like, I was cooking one time, and my daughter walked in the room, was like, "Hey, you talk about giants and all that stuff all the time." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." She's like, "What do you think about woman with snakes for her hair?" And it clicked.
Medusa. Yeah.
Yes, and it clicked. Was like, that's how they're. I should say this before I say this next point. I thought of something earlier. I feel like, and I'll probably get bashed spiritually for saying this, but it is what it is.
Join the club.
Right? I feel like if we look, we see all of their tricks. Because at the end of the day, evil comes from good. So like, evil has powers, but it's capped. We know that. It is capped abilities. They do have abilities, but it's capped. And we have examples in the Bible where the angels don't even know what's going to happen next. So it is what it is. But I feel like we can see all of their tricks because of their capped power. And what is that? Nations, oppression, taxes, genetic manipulation, this whole push for technology and getting us linked into stuff like that. I feel like that's all that they have. And I'm not going to beat on the Democrats, but we saw it, and I'm gonna say this on purpose because it is a reference. I don't pull any political parties, but
No, I don't either. So.
But we can argue that they were trying to avoid Trump getting into office, right? And that's just a factual thing, not picking sides. But the reason I say that is because we saw all of their tricks, right? It was this, then Biden didn't work, then Kamala, and then it was this. We saw their tricks. That's the same thing with evil and the Nephilim and the bad intent. We can see their tricks because they can only do but so much. God even says it. You only can get as much as you can take. So he's gonna cap it. The point of Hollywood is to trick us to think that they can unlimited. They can do whatever they want. You hold up a cross and they can knock that cross right out of your hand. It ain't nothing. I'll burn that Bible. It's not true. You can't do that. We know you can't do that. So that's the crazy thing of why the deception is so important and why you got to do the Department of Education and teach kids. We got taught the same stuff. It's like, oh, no. We don't know about Mayan. We don't know about none of the stuff. But we know about Egypt. We know about Rome. We know about Greece. Do we? Is that really all that we know? Why is it that there's not the same push to find out more? Right? Like you can't. We know about when they're trying to keep us from excavating Baalbek. You're not allowed to get in there and find this stuff. The same dude that says that humans built the pyramids is the same guy that won't let you go in to see the pyramids, to see what really happened. And he's the same one that says that we don't know nothing else. It's the same person. You know what I'm saying? So we that's the push of the deception, because that's really all that they've got, is to keep us. That's the UAP thing. Not to start any arguments, but I think that there's enough evidence that we should be leaning more that this is a government thing than an actual intelligent being from another planet, right? It's our own government trying to trick us to think that it's something more than it actually is, because that's all that they got. So I'll probably get beat up and have some crazy mental stuff in the next couple of days for saying that. That's the only way for us get on the other side of this is to believe. Peter walked on water until he realized he was walking on water, right? So we can technically, like, think about, let me
Faith
ask
is
you,
very powerful.
dude,
People have no idea how powerful faith is.
like, think about this. Comment section, hit us up. Jesus said, if you believe it, you can move a mountain. Was the Son of God that died for us being metaphorical, I should say, or did he really mean it? That you can move a mountain, right? That's a heavy question, man.
All right,
And
let's start praying for a mountain to move. Pick one.
right? So, see what I'm saying? It's like when you really, really boil it down and break it down, I think it does help us get ahead of this whole deception thing. See it for what it is. I think that that's kind of a push for my research too. Is not just wanting to know what happened, but like, you know what I mean? Like confidently wanting to know. And my thing as a manager, you know, I don't have patience to be lied to. I do not have any patience to be lied to. At this point, you know, I know the tricks. I know the places to hide in the aisle. You know what I mean? So it's like, let's just be honest with each other. It'll be a lot easier. I don't have any patience. It got to the point when I would have to talk to people. I would always go ahead and do my research, get all the answers first. That way I could be like, well, you know, you're saying this, but what about this? You know, let's
What
cut
I
to
did
the
with my
chase.
kids. I did that with my
Yo,
kids. I already knew the answer and I'd ask just to
yes.
check their honesty. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a thing. But again, it's on my heart to say it, man. It looks like the pieces are there for us all to kind of put it together. It's a heavy push. I don't know how we would all rile up together and get
You know,
against it.
I don't like unresolved things either. I hate it when there is not just something unresolved, but lying involved with the unresolvedness. Like there's a reason that when people are writing music and you use a chord with tension, that you have a resolving note afterwards. It's because nobody likes the tension of unresolved stuff, especially when something's false. And so I totally get that. But you know, you brought up the World Fair thing. Don't you think it's odd that in that generation, just before it, in the late to mid 1800s, into the 90s, it's almost as if this conglomeration of rebellious angels got together, like I was saying earlier, and decided, like you were saying, all right, this is how we're going to build our Novus Ordo Seclorum, and gathered together. And that's when evolution started, Rockefeller-based education, where let's create a bunch of worker drone idiots that don't think for themselves and never critically analyze anything. They're just, in fact, we'll even set the school schedule to 9-to-5 job type situation, never question authority, obey, obey, obey. And then you had Theosophy start with Madame Blavatsky and Alicia Bailey, Aleister Crowley, all in that same group, spreading the whole, we were star-seeded here by aliens from another planet, and we're evolutionary beings, and they've helped us to grow into what we are today. And the people back then were just ancient retards that didn't even invent the wheel, even though we can look back now and say, really? So people who created Baalbek and the temples and all this, no idea how to make a wheel. Sure, I believe that.
Well,
I don't know, but it just seems odd that all of that kind of came about in the late 1800s, and here we are, this generation, experiencing the consequences of that evolutionary mold of technology and teaching and Rockefeller medicine, education, all of it, and the world's completely screwed up. And it's like we're so apathetic and we don't dig. And I can tell you from experience recently on Facebook that all people do is read a headline. They don't look at what you actually posted as material. You could put an hour and a half podcast explaining what you just wrote about or spoken of, or like in your blog. They'll read the headline of the blog and then like argue with you about it. Did you read the blog? Clearly you didn't, because if you had, you wouldn't have just argued what you argued. But we have all these people who don't want to read. They don't want to take the time or effort to go beyond a headline. And that's what we have now. No critical thinkers whatsoever. It's just emotional knee-jerk reaction. And I'm not, this audience, most of you aren't that way. But there are people clearly that we live amongst who are NPCs roaming around us that seem to be exactly that way. They're all black mirrored.
Well, dude, COVID showed us that, and not to bring up the C
Yeah.
word or anything, but golly.
I'm going to have to bleep that word. Thanks.
Yeah,
No,
right.
I'm
My
just
bad. Man, I remember
kidding.
the first time that me and my wife got out of the house, and then we went to the Walmart, went up the
You talking about
street.
after the 2020s?
Well, yeah, like
Yeah.
when it went down, and then when it was locked down, and then you were first allowed. When you were first, it was like, all right, it's safe to go out. We went out, we went to Walmart, and it was like a movie, man. It was like all the, Walmart has a bunch of entrances. All the entrances were like shut down and bandings, and there were people with in head to toe things, and one at a time. It was,
So
we
I to
walked
this day,
in.
I don't shop there.
Yeah, man, and I looked at my wife. I was like, "Are we about to die? And we don't know that we're about to die because we can." And I'll say the C word. So the takeaway from the C word was how horrible it was, right? Like the panic stricken. But we all know now that it didn't match the panic stricken, right? Like it was put out that if you looked at somebody with it, you were gonna die, but it wasn't happening. So that's why I was saying to my wife was like, "Are we literally about to die?" And they didn't really push that message properly, because it's like, if we're about to die, we're not going to Walmart. You know what I mean? Like, why are, I mean, it was like 15 people in line. It's like, all right, technically, if we're about to die, you didn't do your job because these guys are outside about to walk inside. So you know what I'm saying? So that was the hard part. Especially, I was at that point, I was managing union through COVID. And union, you got to walk a certain line because. So everything was so much more dramatic. And me as a spectator was like going against regionals and directors of like, I think, do we
I went through
believe
the
it?
same thing. Yes.
And the decisions that were being made, it was so crazy. But the point is, and I hate to say the sheep aspect, because at the end of the day, all of us were involved, whether we believed it or not, because we kind of had to be, right? Because it was to the point where it's so hard to. I think about this a lot of like, how do you actually like revolutionize, and how do you actually stand up? It's would be hard, because at this point, how many humans are there just in general? We all have different motivations, different mindsets. We all have things that we can lose and we can't lose. So it would be hard to have an actual uprising, I should say. But it showed us, how scary. Again, going back to the kings and the princes thing. How does all this, how did it start? How did it keep going? How did we get the C word and the reaction from that, from our politicians and our mainstream media that was pushing a guy that does computers? Not going to say his name and give him any justice, but this one dude that has nothing to do with nothing but a computer was telling us about health. Wasn't that like a red flag that this was not right? Some people,
Absolutely.
right? But were those appointed spiritual beings? And some of them are good and some of them bad. And some have ill intent. Because I know you've heard this too, that rituals and sacrifices can look different. What if that was a mass
Oh, I
ritual,
think definitely it was a big fear ritual. They feed off it for sure.
right?
Big
Because,
giant fear ritual and control. And
this goes
we've
back
seen
to,
plenty of other rituals, like the stuff leading up to it. You look, there's no, folks, it's not coincidental that during some very large sports events, we saw things prior to the events of 2020 that mimicked it. Kids in hospital beds, nursing. I mean, we all know it. And for those of you who fell for it, Lord be with you. Well, my wife and I were a bit concerned at first when we saw the videos out of China, people dropping. And do you remember the videos where people would be standing there? Suddenly it's like they saw something, they'd start twisting around like something was terrifying them, and they just dropped dead. And so we were really put off by that. But then when we saw everybody who was behind you have to get this specific needle push, and then it became like this demented boyfriend where you don't answer the text. Like first they were like, this is really great for you. And you know what? De Blasio was out there smacking his lips and eating a cheeseburger. Oh, you mean fries comes with this? Is it okay to eat fries and a burger during this time of the day? This comes with the needle in the arm? Awesome. And then when we wouldn't do it, it was like, oh, it's going to be a cold winter of death for all of you, I'm afraid. So
well,
sorry.
well, check this out. So you pull out, I just want to throw this in really quick. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, you're fine.
I got, this is, sometimes you get to see some behind the scenes stuff. and it's kind of fun. So as a manager of a facility at that point, so we know about Twitter files and we know about all that fun stuff. So I think that there was a way more internal push on organizations and businesses than has come out, because and I'm not gonna, I ain't gonna, I ain't gonna say the name of the company. I don't, go down them roads. But there was a heavy push from the director of where I was at to, it was like, hey, we got, I forget what they called it, but it was like a tracking system. And it was like, hey, all facilities can upload everybody's V stuff, and then we can have, I can have record of it. And then we'd help with it, blah, blah. And it was like, okay. I didn't really say nothing. See, it was like a manager meeting or whatever. And then, I'm I'm in the South, you know what I mean? So like, it was
Same
like,
here.
so I never even said nothing to my guys, nothing. Cause we all agreed. I never, blah. So then I started getting harassed. Brass wants to know why nobody in your facility has gotten the V. And I was like, well, that's none of anybody's, this got nothing to do with you. It's got none of your
Right.
business. Why, and it was like, well, they really want to, but I kept getting these phone calls of like, why aren't you pushing to get, and I told him flat out, I had to get on the phone with the director. And I was like, I just want to remind you that I am in Virginia. We all have a certain mentality around here, man. And Rebellion kind of started around here. If you remember, it was like,
Yeah.
we're not down with
Tennessee
that.
here, so yes, I get it.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not, you said voluntary. You messed up. I'm not pushing it by any stretch. So the point of me saying this is, I read between the lines, and my company was probably one of trillions of companies that were getting a government push to not only get the V, but track it so they could have lists of employees of companies and states. And I was like, yo, y'all are up to something. And then
Huge red
they
flag.
finally let it go, and because they realized, juggernaut
And
means
yeah, now it's morphed into the digital ID. They know that the way they were going with it is not going to work. They've got to do this,
Yeah.
and somehow they're going to make it, because everybody obviously is onto it, and they see it as a negative. So they've got to make it a positive. So I think transhumanism is going to be the push with the digital ID, so that it is attractive to people. Like, oh, well, if you get the digital ID and this transhumanism stuff, you'll be like Google. You'll know everything. And who doesn't want to have their kid to have that and have that advantage in college? Your kid's going to be the retard that doesn't know anything, and this other kid knows everything. And something along those lines is going to happen to where, and they could do it instantly right now. And so people will see the advantage, and maybe it will come with this knowledge of prolonged life, or maybe eternal life, where you can upload your consciousness into the cloud and re-download yourself. And maybe that's why we're told in Revelation that people will seek death and be unable to find it for that 150 days, which, by the way, coincides with the days of the flood, which is weird.
Dog, I was literally about to say that. Literally.
Sorry.
No, don't be. That's how these things are supposed to go. This is a spiritual-led conversation, because you were saying what I was literally thinking.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
It's the hive mind of the Holy Spirit, right? And the counterfeit's coming. That's what we're probably also on.
That's the only way that I can understand that statement. I'm nobody, is what it is, but that's the only way that I feel like that statement can make sense. How can you actually, black and white, not be able to take your own life? Because you can literally just lay in 2 feet of water and take your own life. We know that it is not a hard thing to take your own life. So the fact that death will escape you, the only way I could see that is if you're hooked up and you can't physically be turned off, right? And I think that's the key part, is to be turned off.
Yeah, because you made yourself a part of the beast's hive mind that he wants to emulate from the whole. Lucifer is not all-knowing, and so he wants to be like God. He knows he can't be God, but he wants to be like God here on this earth. And that's one way to do it, is through this technology, is to have his own hive mind. You're locked in. He can know your thoughts if he wants to, and he can even, at this point, now control your thoughts. And I think they had something like that before the flood, which is why everybody's thoughts were evil continually. This is not new. This is just them probably having to do a work around God's restraint. So they're using technology instead of just the spirit realm to be able to do it, because God has blocked the spiritual aspect of it to some degree with the Holy Spirit. Because look, we're a privileged generation, right? We have the first mystery, whatever you want to call it, like Paul says, where the Holy Spirit lives in us like a temple. Nobody else had that. Other people would have the Holy Spirit come upon them, give them whatever, are all linked together through God the Spirit living in us like a temple. Nobody else has had that, folks. Don't take that for granted. So when you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, this memory came to mind," or "I feel really bad about the sin I just committed," "Oh, this, that, or the other thing," that's not you. That's the Holy Spirit, according to Scripture, doing that in you. So if you ever wondered if He's living in you or influencing you, there you go. Just look at what Scripture says He does, and then you can know. So
Yeah.
another tangent. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you straight. Yeah, I mean that's how a lot of my research goes. I was researching Bethlehem the other day, and I'm still working on that. I'm gonna put a video out because I found something really interesting about Bethlehem, and how it looks like it's split tribes and split families, like Bethlehem Judah and Bethlehem Ephrathah. But the point is, I was researching Ibzan from Bethlehem, one of the judges, and it was like I was trying to. Sometimes there's a character, there's not a lot on them, so you have to think differently, like say translate the name or where they're from. So I was getting this guy, and I was thinking maybe there's something in Bethlehem, and in Hebrew it's Beit Lachem, and I was looking at that word, and I was thinking, and this is something that Dave we talked about earlier, and I was like, well, let me check over here. And in my head it went through, check Bethlehem. And I literally, like almost out loud, I was like, well, I'll do that in a second, and then it was like, it wasn't me talking. It wasn't me talking. I was like, oh, and it was an easy one to miss. Literally in my head, I was like, well, I'll get to that in a minute. And I'll just, I'll look here. I was like, all right. So I caught it. So I went back, and that's when I discovered there's way more to Bethlehem, a bigger story about David and ultimately the line of Jesus. So that's an example of like, you get tapped, you get shown, this is a super spiritual thing, and it's all around us. It's a really crazy thing, getting tapped into it and being shown this stuff. It's a really wild journey. You never know what you're going to find. Crazy stuff.
I know. And it's like, for instance, when the whole reason I tapped you for the interview was the same thing. I was listening to either the Dig Bible podcast with my friend Justin, or it might have been the Prometheus Lens pod. I can't remember which one it was. And I remember you talking about some things, and I was like, I've been going over some of this stuff. It would be good to have him on there. And then it was impressed upon me. Yes, send him a message. Do it now. And that's why I gave you such a quick, hey man, I was just listening to your stuff, and that's some awesome stuff. Would you consider coming on the show or whatever? And, gosh, I'm so glad I did, even though, we've been talking for almost 2 or 3 hours. It's all really great stuff that I think people need to know and need to hear, because of the time. Like, we were all born into this time for a reason, because if you're a Christian, God knew you could handle what's coming. And if you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, then perhaps the Lord meant for you. Well, we know the Lord meant for everybody, but not everybody's going to be. But if, you should highly consider the fact that there is a God and that He's been operating in human history. He loves those of you who are listening and wants you to have a relationship with Him, and provided a way for you to have a relationship with Him, and, enter the world of the strangeness that we're discussing here, because the Bible is not a boring book. It is filled with an incredible story from beginning to end. And we've only scratched the surface of it. We're like chipping away on just the exterior white portions of the Egyptian pyramids. We haven't even got through the stones here in our discussion.
Exactly.
So it's better than the Silmarillion. It's better than all of it put together of Tolkien's work. There's nothing compared to it. And if you're not in a right relationship with God and reading His word, you're missing out on a ton of stuff, including the research habits of somebody like Adam Ferris here. It's amazing to me. If you have more time, I'm willing to talk as long as you want. Is there anything you want to wrap up with, if you have things you need to get done today or whatever? I want you to be able to get everything out you want to get out.
Sure. Yeah. So for me at this point, what do you want to hit? You know what I mean? We can kind of go anywhere.
Well, Okay, so I did want to touch on one last thing, and then we can wrap it up if you want, because I got to go later to celebrate. My mom's birthday was actually October 30th, and I had to work Tuesday through Friday. I have no life,
Yeah.
and so we just decided to celebrate it today, and or this afternoon. But what I wanted to get into a little bit more is we know from talking about it earlier that these angels, obviously, most of them, have decided not to be good ones. They, God even warned them, look, how long will you continue to favor the unjust and the rich and, basically what we're seeing today. And that's where I wanted to go into, because I know in most of your podcasts, you're discussing the Old Testament and the tribes and the lineage. But I want to get to why that's important today and make it somewhat applicable today so that people are aware of what you're looking at. I know we touched on some of it already, but when we say things about Abraham and Lot being visited by three human-like people that, it seems like Abraham thought that they were humans initially. Or Lot, it seems like in that case, they knew they were not normal men, but they still had human appearance. Or Manoah and the angel of the Lord, or like you said, Persia, Tyre, all these weird things. And so we see this today as not necessarily happening, I think, because of what happened in the 1800s and the 1900s, for whatever reason. And this is something I'd like to touch on also. Why are they trying to keep it hidden? I have my suspicions. I want to hear yours first. And then I guess what I'm wondering is, are you on board with the idea that many of our people in positions of power today and our musicians and superstars, maybe not all of them, but it sure seems to me like some of them are probably not human and maybe angelic and just reforming themselves like the Ezekiel 8 ritual. What are your thoughts on that? And what do we do about it? I mean, it seems like all we can do is wait and smoke a peace pipe until they until it's
Yeah.
over. So
Yeah.
what do you think?
No, that's excellent end of the show question. It's going to really bring it all together. I really like that. I really appreciate that. So when I started this research, I didn't want, I try to make it a point about me. I like to do things my way. I don't like to be, if you were like, man, Adam, you remind me of, it's like, I didn't do my job, right? Like it's a big thing with me. So I wanted to walk into this like blind. I haven't heard anybody. I'm learning it all my own. So I would say it's a good assumption that a lot of people think the Bible is a bunch of different books and that somehow they're connected. What I learned is this one crazy story because we get Genesis 6 and we get all that stuff and then we get some giants. Then in Nehemiah, the base Hagiborum is mentioned. The house of the giants, house of the mighty men is mentioned. And then in Haman, in the book of Esther, it talks more about Amorites, Jebusites, Girgashites. And so it kind of clicked for me. It was like, that's what the story is. That's what this whole thing literally is angels came down. Well, God made everything, gave it to us. Angels came down, and it's been warfare their entire time. That's why each book mentions either the tribes or spiritual beings, kings and princes and stuff. That's why it's all continuously tied. That's why, the Old Testament and the New Testament, technically it's not testament, it's covenant. So it's the first covenant, first blood covenant, and the second blood covenant. But what does that mean? What that means is things changed from this first covenant to the second covenant. The main change was Jesus. But it's like, well, is it all connected? Why is all these pieces have to be, this important story wouldn't function properly if it was a whole bunch of different characters, right? That's not how you write a story. You don't have, your Superman and your Wolverine, right? So it's all got to, and that's what clicked for me, was this is one entire medieval giant lion-faced men, angels are still here story.
Seaboard, yeah.
Yes. So that's the first part, is to answer to I'm gonna break your question down. So that's the first part is it will help us all get to know God, because that's the point of all of this. I just want to make sure that we tackle that. I don't want to come off as like it's a research book. The point is to know God. Plain and simple is to want to know God. And the way that you learn the things that I'm bringing and you're learning and we're all doing is by wanting to know God. That's the only way that you really learn this stuff. I can confidently say I wouldn't have figured out any of what I've figured out if I just looked at it as a history book. God wouldn't have shown me what he's shown me. So in order for us to understand it, we got to understand the actual story. The actual story is a very crazy medieval, we're under attack. Giants were real. Lion-faced men were absolutely real. Now, what do we do with that information? What we do with that information is get closer to God, because at the end of the day, like I said, good is good and good is everything. Evil is just a little bit of good that they've taken and misconstrued. Like their power is capped, their abilities are capped. It is what it is. So we will have the proper understanding to walk with God. We'll also have a better understanding of why Jesus was so important, why all of that was so important. Because again, like I made points earlier in the show of like, if we don't look at it for what it is Jesus as awesome as he is? Well, if it's just normal people and it was blah, well then he's not as awesome as he is. And he is super awesome. So you know what I'm saying? So we're missing that. And that will help us battle our own personal issues and our own demons, because we'll be more prepared for the oncoming. For me specifically, doing what I do, I unfortunately have been opened up to spiritual attacks. It's what happens. You know this. When you're in this world, you're everybody's favorite, good and bad. And initially, when I was doing this, I would just have bad days and I would be in bad moods. And, dad would be upset, and now I've learned that pattern to where right before I have an important show, I'm messed up. I've got funky stuff going on in my head. I can battle it better now because I've understood, I've learned that, it's not me. It's nothing wrong with me. There's forces trying to keep me from doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So you're right. That's the armor of God.
I prayed Thursday going into the show that, because I know exactly what you're saying. And I prayed for no technical difficulties. We'd do okay, that the Lord would watch over both of us and keep us protected and give us discernment. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. And I can say that confidently because the way I look at it is we've read the last page of the book. We know how this is actually going to go down. The meaning of life is to want to know God, not to know God, but to want to know God, walk with him, multiply and enjoy this earth that I gave you. That's the meaning of life. And I'm a person that I don't go to work because I'm bored at home. You know what I mean? I love life. I love to laugh. I love to have a good time. I'm silly. Like I love that stuff. So I don't like missing out on, the good parts of life. And unfortunately, that's the whole Nephilim thing. Is you mentioned the work schedule and while we're in this and a 9 to 5 and a 40 hours and a 65 or 67 if we move the age back. Who was it? Nikki Haley, there was like, yeah, well, humans we're living longer, so we should probably push the retirement age. But I mean, let's get out of my face with that. Like, come on.
What a douchey statement to make. Right? It's unbelievable. Yeah.
But if again, I'm gonna have a bad couple of days after this. I know that.
I can't wait to read the comment section. It's gonna be great.
If we know what they're capable of doing, right? Because it's just deception. Like it's clear. Didn't it come out that the V actually had some kind of like bioengineer that can change some stuff? Like, didn't it come out recently? They were just kind of like, oh, no big deal.
If you look deeply into it, it's self-assembling graphene technology that has the ability to communicate by supposedly, and again, I don't have 100% evidence. I'm just telling you what others I've seen. It can self-replicate, build itself up as a nerve center or replicating your body's nerve communication thing. And it may be why you have the white clots is as it's assembling, your body attacks it and creates these clots. But supposedly they would utilize that as a means to communicate to your body for good purposes, of course, to be able to see what's going on in your body and make sure they heal you and so on. But instead, we're all feeding a tree as a result of those who took it, or many of us are, so yes, there is that nanotechnology, electromagnetic, because they know the body is made up of electromagnetic stuff, and that torpy little French atheist guy who said he could hack us has obviously found a way to do it by putting it in us. I think their attempts through the air, food, or whatever is somewhat of a failure, which is why they wanted to put it directly into the bloodstream and assemble it that way. And it's probably going to be somewhat connected to our digital ID, where they consolidate everything into one centralized warehouse thing. I mentioned that on an earlier podcast about a week ago. That I think that's the purpose of the digital ID. I mean, we all have social security numbers, but it's not the same. If you can take everything into a system that they've already got developed and put it under one digital ID and one big, it is so much more easily accessible, and you're so much easily controlled as a result. So anyway.
Yeah, no,
go ahead.
exactly.
I'm sorry.
No, you good. And if I started a GoFundMe page, like personally, Adam Ferris, we get off this thing and I start a GoFundMe page for all of what you just said. Hey man, I got an idea for this shot and it's going to do all this and this and this. I would be spoken to pretty harshly, right? Like I couldn't just do that, but the government did it and then came out afterwards and was like, oh, hey, by the way, right? Doesn't that kind of show like how things are actually going on in our world? You know what I mean? So
it does to me, yes.
Right. So, but yeah, so that's the point in all of this, is for us to have a better understanding of what life is supposed to be like, an appreciation for what life is supposed to be like. Because I think that's too a heavy message in the Bible of be happy, enjoy, right? Because wine, literally, it says wine was given because it makes men happy. Now, I'm not an advocate for drinking and all that stuff, but you see, my point is like it was made to make you happy. Everything was based on that. But then, how does actual life look? The government doesn't want us to be happy. There's no push for us to enjoy, and me and you be buddies, and people of different colors to be buddies. Like, no, there's a heavy push for separation and division, and we're in charge. We're the ones that can make the better decision for you. It's like, really, it's right there. But again, I keep going, like, that's why there's a push for us to be autonomous and plugged in, because their power is capped. And the only way to get it is deception. Everybody, the Nephilim deception and books and all that have been on that. But that's literally the only way is to trick
and
us.
Fear, yeah. Fear is one of their biggest weapons too. It's like they spent decades building up trust with us, because people trust Walter Cronkite and I love CNN, Fox News, I love my Republican guy, I love my Democrat guy. So they build up all this trust with you so that they can push fear, so that they can get you to do what they want. And none of them care about you. I hate to tell you this, but they're all selected. They're all put in there for a reason, and they don't really care about you. If you don't believe it, you just wait. You'll get the proof.
The Cleopatra's Needle, that's too much to go into. Everybody research it. But I'll say this, the guy that financed Cleopatra's Needle to come over here to an Egyptian obelisk, the living member of his family is Anderson Cooper. So it's to your point. They're in charge of the knowledge.
I remember there being, when I heard you speak on this, somebody said the black and white checkerboard and Masonic tools in it.
Yeah. They financed Cleopatra's Needle, the obelisk. The base was black and white tile. When they opened it up, the actual Freemasonry imagery, the tools were in there. The plum, the square, all that was actually in there. When I read that blew me away, because it was like, it confirms everything. Like, we all have our speculation about secret societies and Freemasonry and blah, 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 blah. But when you find out that among of all the things that happened with that they had those actual tools, that
crazy, isn't it?
Means that from back then, when all of this was going down, giants in Genesis 6, the 70 ancient ones, the ancient knowledge, it's been passed continuously, because people die, you know what I mean? So you got to continue the traditions and the knowledge. And that's how. And that's real-time proof. Real-time proof, not speculation.
Absolutely. And again, we've only touched on the surface of this, because that's how these buildings were built, folks. All these things in the past. I listened to a guy named Base Forge. I don't know if you've seen his Instagram, but he, if not, you should check it out. I don't know if he's a Christian or not. I don't think he is, but he brings up the ancient buildings and how they're shaped like computer boards, and how they have to do with perfect symmetry and the Fibonacci thing, and how water is involved with that, and how water takes certain shapes and certain schematics with sound, and how all of this is interrelated. I want to get him on the show. I don't know if he'll come on with it being a Christian based show or not, but it'd still be a great conversation if he would come on. But anyway, great stuff. So we'll wrap things up. And if you just want to let everybody know where they can discover your wonderful work, I've already gone over the YouTube channel, and it's amazing. You're going to get all kinds of great stuff, from different interviews to his shorter videos, anywhere from 1 minute in length to about 7 or 8 on different subjects that are fascinating, and so on. But go ahead and tell everybody where they can discover you.
Yep.
And I'll make sure that I put it in. For those of you listening, I'm gonna put this in the description, so I'll link stuff so you can go purchase his book and support his great work, and go visit his site and like it and subscribe to him. But go ahead. Sorry.
YouTube, as you mentioned, E. Adam Ferris. 5 Stones, my graphic novel, is on Amazon, and I'll get you that link. It is just super awesome. I'm very proud of it. Very gritty. It's to the point. It's 5 stones because there were 5 giants there, and you can kind of see a little bit behind me. I put the 5 giants in there. I want it to be a visual interpretation of the Bible. eadamferris.substack.com is my blog writings. Just like you mentioned, I'll take a subject and I'll just dissect it, and I'll use scripture, and they're usually pretty short, just quick readings, really to the point. I don't try not to do any speculation. And then Instagram, E. Adam Ferris. I put some stuff up on there too. Super accessible. Comments, questions, concerns, just holler at me.
I can attest to that. Usually when I send an invite, I either don't hear anything, or it takes weeks or whatever or days for somebody to respond. But Adam's always, of course, that could all change if he becomes inundated with as many interviews that he's probably going to be doing here within the next year or so. And for those of you who are regular listeners, as you know, like Adam was mentioning earlier about time, I have gone down to 1 show a week instead of Monday, Wednesday, Friday. For time, we have an album that's supposed to be called The 12s, our band Pilgrims Gray, that comes out mid-November. So I've got to get crunching on that, because I have short time as it is, and I'm very particular, and I like mix to death. So I've really got to pressure myself to start really getting on that. And I want time to work on the novel that I'm working on. And I can't do that working 50 hours a week and doing 3, originally, Adam, I had this idea of just doing, like, on Wednesday nights, I would read emails of people commenting because it seemed easier to do that than just sit there and type and reply to everybody. So I figured I could just take the most common ones and do it that way. And then Friday, I was doing top 3 stories of the week. And it just got to be too much. It was supposed to be 20, 30-minute shows, and each one of them turned into an hour. And it's not just, people don't understand, it's not just the show you're doing in that moment. Like, when we're done here, I got to edit this. I've got to upload it. I've got to, Riverview does do the clips, but you still have to edit the clips. You can't just use a raw clip. And so it takes hours, and so I decided, for my sanity's sake and to spend more time with my wife and family, that I was just going to go down to 1 show a week. So sorry for those of you who are disappointed by that, but it is what it is. I still love you all, but it'll be Mondays, and hopefully we'll do more interviews. And I would love, since Adam and I went over a lot of different subjects here, maybe Adam would be willing to come back at some point, and we could maybe narrow down a couple things and go really, down 6 feet to 100 feet into the dirt on some of these subjects, rather than just kind of scratching the surface of some of them. But anyway, Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope 1 million people watch this and it goes viral, because you deserve the attention for your listening to God and doing that digging and research. And I think it's very timely, since giants seem to be becoming, and not just giants, but, the whole subject, Anunnaki. We have the 3-eye atlas, we have deception coming up, and people need to know the truth about this stuff. And I think you really help get that down. And we need more people like you, more podcasts like this, flooding the market to get that news out so that people aren't deceived and they get to know who God is. Anyway, last word is yours.
Man, after that, it'd be hard to get any words out. But the one thing that, given the opportunity, I like to leave everybody with, the message that's been put on my heart is listening. It's a big thing for everybody. God wants us to want to know Him. He wants to talk, and I put money down right now. If you really want to talk to God, you can. If you disagree with me, please reach out to me. We'll talk about it personally. But the point is listening. Listening's the hard part. It's hard part in general, right? A lot of people will just talk, and you don't listen. But listening, because listening to the Alpha and Omega, the being that made everything, he's not going to talk like we talk. It'll be symbols or messages or things that you hear, things you see. You might be thinking of something and you look at a label on a bottle. So listening is a key thing. If we work on that, we focus on that, then everything will get opened up and God will show us everything.
Amen. I'm all for it. All right. Well, Godspeed to everyone, and you guys have a great work week, and we will see you next Monday. See you, Adam.
Gather round, ye travelers, lend me your ear. A tale of heroes who knew no fear. Through shadowed woods and mountains steep, their legacy lives where the wild winds sweep. Raise your tankards high and sing for the great pilgrims and what they bring to every corner. Their stories stay. Hail the Chronicles of Pilgrims Grey. Through cursed lands where few would tread, the brave walked forth where many fled. Lanterns lit the endless night, their spirits burned a guiding light. Raise your tankards high and sing for the great pilgrims and what they bring to every corner. Their stories stay. Hail the Chronicles of Pilgrims Grey. The laughter fades, yet echoes strong in every heart. Their timeless song, mirrors carried on the ale-soaked breeze. Songs as endless